Welcome to Bourbon B.S, the podcast where we dive deep into the spirit world, one shot at a time. I'm Mike Fody, founder and director of the Bison Bourbon and Spirits Training Company, where my goal is to help you master spirits to guide your spirit choices. I am, among many things, a UK whiskey ambassador, executive bourbon steward, and certified spirits judge, coming to you from the Buffalo, Niagara region of New York State. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Bourbon B.S, that's bold spirits. While the name highlights bourbon, all spirits may be presented in the future. Today, I'm trying to help you understand the sensory experience of spirits and why you should be wary of taking spirit selection advice from articles, reviews, ratings, and medals. Don't take whiskey selection advice from articles, reviews, medals, ribbons, or numerical ratings, and I don't think most people should either. Why? No two people's sensory experience is the same. We're all different. This isn't my opinion, it's a scientific fact. Every human has a sensory fingerprint with differences in genetics, physiology, memory, culture, diet, and even mood shape how we perceive aroma, flavor, and texture. Two people can taste the exact same whiskey and have completely different experiences, and both are valid. So what are the key human considerations? First is palate sensitivity. Differences in our generics and the density of our sensory endings and the function of our taste buds, olfactory receptors, and trigeminal nerve responses are different. Some people are known as super tasters or super smellers, and they perceive subtle aromas and tastes more acutely than most people. But the number of super smellers or super tasters is around 10 to at most 20% of the population. The next difference or consideration is olfactory memory and training. Exposure and repeated practice enhances one's ability to recognize and remember a broader array of aromas and flavors. I know when I first started the whole sensory experience, I found it very confusing. I found that there were a lot of people that claimed that there were smells and tastes that I just didn't get. But over the last 15 to 20 years, I've developed a more acute aromatic ability, and everybody can, because the sense of smell is the only one of our five senses that we can actually affect or improve. The next factor is cognitive biases. Awareness of a spirit's brand, price, or reputation can influence, even unconsciously, the perceived quality or flavor of a drink. And there's also cultural and personal preferences. Beverage traditions, personal experience, and even language shape what notes are identified and valued by different people. The next thing that can influence a judge's assessment of a product is industry incentives. The people that are participating in these formal sensory programs are being either directly or indirectly compensated many times when they're participating in these product evaluations. And I've found after completing extensive sensory training, including the sensory course at the Moonshine University, I understand how the sausage gets made. Other professionals have incentives, brand relationships, or industry ties that influence the final outcome or the final result of their assessment of a spirit. This doesn't mean they're dishonest, it means they're human, and all humans are influenced by context, expectations, and incentives. The awards often reflect industry dynamics more than universal quality or enjoyment. The next factor that can affect our ability to sense a spirit is sensory fatigue, and it's real and it's unavoidable. Judges are often asked to evaluate dozens of samples in a short time period. Ethanol is an anesthetic. It numbs the palate, dulls the nose, and fatigues the brain's sensory pathways. Spitting doesn't prevent sensory fatigue, even though you may try. It doesn't eliminate it. And hydrating doesn't prevent sensory fatigue. Taking a break helps, but it needs to be a really long break for it to make a difference. Even the most skilled judges eventually lose their precision because it's basically unavoidable. So, what should people do who want to become better at sensing, smelling, tasting spirits? Well, this is where the fun begins. Because the sensory experience of spirits is one of the most personal, rewarding, and creative explorations you can have. Here are additional insights to help people figure out their own likes and dislikes. The first thing is trust your first impression. Your brain is wired to make rapid sensory judgments. If something smells appealing immediately, that matters. If it smells off, that matters too. Don't let a reviewer convince you that you should like something or you should not like something. And I also encourage you to try the products at different times and more than once, because sometimes your current situation can influence the way you assess a spirit. Explore across different contexts, and this is what I'm talking about. A whiskey can taste completely differently depending on the time of day, the glass shape, the temperature, your mood, what you ate earlier, whether you're indoors or outdoors, did you brush your teeth with some kind of a minty flavored toothpaste? All of those things can affect your impression of a spirit. And then the next thing that's really challenging, which I found challenging, is to build a personal sensory vocabulary. Most people think they don't know how to taste. They actually just don't know the words. They don't have the right words to express what they're experiencing. A simple framework helps. I like to use tasting sheets that have the guides on some of the flavors, aromas, and colors that you can experience. So a simple framework includes sight, which is looking at the color, the viscosity, and the clarity. Are there any particles or anything in it? The next thing is smell. And start with general things like it smells fruity or it smells floral. Does it smell like a cereal or a grain? Is there a woody aroma? Does it smell spicy or earthy? Is there a chemical smell to it? Next is taste. Is it sweet, sour, bitter, salty, or umami? I don't know what umami is, but if you do, that's awesome. And then finally is touch. The viscosity. Is there heat or burn? Is it astringent? So does it give a drying effect? And it could also be oily. And then finally, how long do those experiences last? Are they short? Is it a medium duration? And it is of a long duration. Does that flavor or aroma hang in your mouth? I recently tasted a gin that was aged for 3 years in a new white oak cask, and that gin flavor, that thing lasted in my mouth for a day. I couldn't stand it. I'm not a gin drinker either, but that's neither here nor there. Once someone can describe what they're experiencing, and you're doing this on a regular basis, and I mean pretty frequently, you will be able to start developing your own vocabulary, your own sense of aromas and tastes and mouthfeel. So I encourage you to, not over imbibe. Again, I typically, if I go to a tasting or a bar or an event, I typically will use a maximum of like 4 or 5 whiskeys to taste. Now that doesn't mean I'm not going to have a dram afterwards, but if I'm actually trying to determine if it's something I want to buy or not, I definitely don't have more than 4 or 5 samples. The other thing is to track patterns, not scores. Instead of chasing medals, notice the patterns, because patterns reveal your own preferences and are more reliable than ratings. Do you prefer a high rye or a low rye bourbon? Those are things that you can find on your labels of the whiskey bottle, and I always look at labels. Now, sometimes it's challenging because a lot of producers or manufacturers don't list their mash bill or the other things that they've done to the product, but some of them are required by law as well. Do you like a sherry influence or avoid it? Do you enjoy peat or not? Do you gravitate towards certain proofs? In other words, do you like a higher proof product or do you like a lower proof product? Now, of course, to be whiskey, it has to be a minimum of 40% ABV. But as I had mentioned in the previous episode, podcast episode, some people are really pushing that envelope up into the 70s. And that's not something that I prefer, because I feel like there's a lot of congeners or aromatic compounds that are removed as a result of distilling a product up to an ABV of 70 or above. And then finally, do you prefer younger, brighter spirits or older ones that have more oak-driven aromas and tastes? The next thing to do is always do side-by-side tasting. Comparative tasting is the fastest way to learn. And blind tastings are awesome too, because when you do a blind tasting, it removes any preconceived ideas that you might have about the products that you're tasting. I always try to have 2 or 3 samples next to each other, and that teaches you more about what you're liking and what you're disliking, and it gives you an idea of where to proceed to buy your next bottle of spirits. Understand that memory drives flavor. Aromas are processed in the same part of the brain that handles memory and emotion. That's why one person smells Grandpa's workshop and another one smells vanilla and oak. Your memories shape your experience, and so no assessor or reviewer can ever replicate that for you. Everybody has had different experiences on top of the other things I mentioned. Now, I'm not completely against, quote, experts, but I would only use them as reference points. If you find that you have been tasting products and then you read reviews by others and they seem to be very similar to yours, that might be a pattern or a guide that could help you. It's sort of a way to calibrate what you like, but I wouldn't let it make a decision. I never buy a product based on what somebody else says. I always want to try it and taste it, especially now that I've got a pretty significant collection. And the goal is always the same thing. Use your own senses as the final authority. The bottom line, there's absolutely a place for the expert commentary, industry awards, and thoughtful reviews, but only as supplements, not as substitutes, and not to make your final purchase decision. The most honest, reliable, and rewarding way to choose a spirit is to explore them yourselves. Your senses, memories, preferences, it's your journey. And frankly, that's what makes this world of spirits so much damn fun. Whether you're a seasoned connoisseur or just starting your whiskey journey, understanding how you process products, how you experience them, is critical when you choose to buy a new product. So I guess you get the idea. The process of seeing, smelling, tasting, and touching spirits is a deeply personal act. The world of spirits encompasses a captivating diversity of colors and flavors and aromas, textures, and traditions. When savoring a complex single malt or a vibrant botanical gin, a deeply aged rum, or any other spirit, the process of sensory evaluation is both an art and a science. Mastering how to experience spirits enriches your enjoyment. And when you're doing it with other people, that's even so much more fun. So if you go to a distillery or the Bourbon Trail in Kentucky or the single malt or the Scotch Trail in Scotland, doing that with a group of people makes it that much more fun. So you need to develop a consistent method or a framework to experience spirits. There are literally hundreds of tasting guides out there, and I've even developed one that's on my blog page if you like that. But what I say, especially at the beginning, is keep it simple, stupid, the old KISS rule. And the reason I say that is because it's just too difficult to come up with all of these flavors and aromas that these experts either do or claim to experience. I don't usually promote, and I'm not really promoting this program, but I did find that the 2025 Certified Specialist of Spirits Guidebook from the Society of Wine Educators is a great resource. You can buy the book on Amazon without taking the course that they offer. I did find their program to be one of the best online programs, but it can be expensive depending on your budget. And I do like their organization. I do like their books. They do have study materials. But one of the things that I found with this program is that once a week they have a session with a live instructor. Jane Nichols was the one that I worked with or was on with. And what's great about that is you can actually ask questions back and forth. It's just not one of those things where you're reading a bunch of slides online. So you need a framework or an environment for evaluation, and the optimum sensory environment is very hard to replicate because there's different noises, etc. I even find that when I'm doing my podcast. The Buffalo Distilling Company offered to let me do my podcast from their distillery, but the problem is the environment changes. They have people coming in and coming out and deliveries and things like that. And I really needed somewhere where I could get a good environment to be able to record these podcasts. So what you need to do is find a scoring sheet that you like before you start. I would find a very simple one. Look for something that just has a scoring checkbox for appearance, for aromas, for taste. And all you have to do is click a checkbox for the different aspects, which is a lot easier than trying to write down things that you may not even have words for at this time. Prepare an area for sensory evaluation if you're doing it at home or with a small group of people. It should be quiet, well lit, and free from any strong odors or distractions. Perfumes, colognes, things like that. That's going to throw it off completely. Use identical glassware for consistency. Arrange the samples in a logical tasting order. I mean, limit it again to 4 or 5 samples. But you should go from like a light whiskey or spirit to a more robust one, from a young to an old, from a low ABV to a high ABV, from unfinished to a finished or secondarily matured product. Include neutral water, neutral palate cleansers, and something to take notes with. Finally, label each sample discreetly to minimize bias. Or better yet, have somebody else do it for you so that you make the tasting a blind one. And that way you don't have any biases towards the products. The last few points I want to make is to maintain a comfortable room temperature to preserve aroma integrity and to make sure everybody's comfortable, as well as make sure that the higher ABV, the fewer samples you have. So if you're sampling products that are in the like the bottled and bond 50% ABV and above, you want to have fewer samples than if you're keeping it in the 40s, because all of that is going to minimize sensory fatigue, which can occur rapidly with higher ABV spirits. So now on to the main information I wanted to provide with this episode of Bourbon and BS, and that is the steps in the process of examining the spirit. And of course, the first is the appearance assessment factors in spirit analysis. And that starts with the clarity. When you look at the sample, then you should be looking through it in a nice Glencairn glass or something of similar nature. And it should be crystal clear. It really shouldn't be hazy or cloudy. There should be no particulates. There is something that goes on called chill filtration. So the spirits many times will have lipids, which are large molecules that actually precipitate or come out of a solution when you cool it, if you add ice to it. So many distilleries will chill filter it. It's become less popular and there's a lot of controversy about it because many people feel that if you are removing those lipids and other compounds that will precipitate when they're cooled, that it changes the nature of the spirit. I typically do not buy chill filtered products. The next part of the appearance is the color or hue. So what's the base color? And you can find scales for this: straw, gold, amber, mahogany, clear. There's many different colors. I typically just describe it the way I see it. I don't really worry about what other people think the color is. The next part of that is intensity, though. Is it a pale? Is it a deep gold? Is it pale gold? Is it medium gold. Those things are all very subjective. And then the other thing to look for is color uniformity or gradients. It should be completely um, similar throughout the product. There shouldn't be any gradients. The final part that I typically look for is the viscosity or the legs, or sometimes people call them tears. Uh, so you look at the speed at which they form, their thickness, how quickly they move, the consistency, and that can indicate the concentration of alcohol. It can be an indicator of the body of the spirit as well as residual sugars. Other things that you can look for in regards to appearance are the brightness or reflectivity. Is it dull or bright? Again, sediment or floating particles. If there's anything floating or there's sediment in it, that's a problem. Those things should be filtered out. Now, I'm not talking about chilled filtered. When you mature a spirit in a charcoal cask or a cask that's been burned on the inside, the charcoal will actually end up coming into the whiskey, and that needs to be filtered out. Sometimes you'll be able to see bubbles or effervescence. You really shouldn't typically in whiskey, but some products do have it. Some products develop a meniscus or rim variations, and so there might be some different colors around the edge of the liquid. You can also look for opacity or transparency, and there are specific products that if you add a little bit of water to it, it actually becomes more opaque or hard to see through. And then the final component is the oiliness or texture on the glass. How the spirit coats the glass on the inside gives you an idea of the weight of the spirit or the richness. The next step in the process is really the aromatic assessment. You can call it smelling, nosing, but this is one of the key areas where there's a lot of variability, as I mentioned before, and for the reasons that I did mention. Human olfaction or smelling can detect thousands of volatiles, many of which form the distinct character of the distilled spirit. But the difference is that people perceive different volatiles. Some people aren't able to detect the same ones. So I had mentioned super smellers. I don't have to go over that again, but there's a very small population of people. It's only 10 to 20% that have this heightened ability to smell things that other people can't. Now, some of the parameters that you consider with smelling is the fact that the olfactory receptors or genes vary widely between people. And so people basically are hardwired different for detecting aromas. Each person's body expresses a unique combination of usually around 400 smell receptors, meaning that two people may not even possess the exact same receptors needed to detect specific compounds. And past experience shape people's aroma recognition, their ability to associate that recognition with a specific memory. And the more you can do that, I can think about being with my grandmother, who's this little Sicilian lady, when she was baking bread in the morning. And whenever I smell baking bread, it reminds me of my grandma and her making fresh Sicilian bread every morning. Other things that can affect it are environmental factors, your diet, if you've smoked in the past, are you on medications, do you have allergies, have you had a recent meal, especially if it's a spicy meal. People have hormonal differences. Typically, females have a finer ability to detect different smells than males do. It's just a natural part of being a male or a female. And that contributes to your ability to sense the aromas, the specific aromas. Well, I already mentioned sensory fatigue. There's also adaptation that occurs at different rates for different people. So sometimes if you've been in an environment for long enough, you can't even smell it, even though it's there. And your brain interprets aroma signals differently, so that also plays a role in this whole aromatic assessment process. And finally, spirits contain hundreds of volatile compounds. Even slight differences in sensitivity or in concentration of those volatile compounds leads people to assess or experience spirits differently. And then the final thing I'll mention is training. Training matters. I have gotten better at being able to detect aromas just as a result of participating in this kind of stuff for the past 10 to 15 years. The more you do it, the more you develop a vocabulary to express what you're experiencing, and then other people will be able to tie your experiences into theirs, or it will help them develop a vocabulary associated with their aromatic experience. So, your first inhale offers clues about the spirit's quality, its raw materials, production techniques, and its age. There are certain chemicals, like peat, for instance, the phenols that are in peat, those are instantaneously recognizable. The issue then comes down to, do you like them or do you not? And if you do you like a lot of it? Do you like a little bit? So that's sort of the entry point into the tasting experience. But smelling really prepares the palate and primes the mind for further exploration. The olfactory science reveals two main detection mechanisms. They're called orthonasal olfaction, which is inhaling through the nose, and retronasal olfaction, which is through the back of the throat when swallowing, both of which play roles in the spirit evaluation. There's actually a path that will go up through the back of your mouth up into your nasal cavity that allows you to, quote, smell while you're eating. And that's where a lot of your perception of the aroma of food comes from, actually, and your enjoyment in food, is because the orthonasal and the retronasal experiences complement each other. So now let's go through a brief step-by-step nosing procedure. So you want to, again, select appropriate glassware. You need to use a tulip-shaped nosing glass, a Glencairn glass, a neat glass, a Coppola glass. Those are all, they have a large bowl at the bottom and then they get narrower at the top. And that gives the volatile compounds the ability to concentrate or to move together near the top of the glass, which makes it easier for you to detect them, especially if they're low concentration congeners. You want to pour and observe when you are pouring your sample. So pour a small sample, roughly 1 to 1.5 ounces, which is 30 to 45 mLs, and swirl it very gently. Unlike wine, where you'll see people swirling it very aggressively, if you do that with a spirit, especially because of the higher concentrations of alcohol, that will impact your experience because the alcohol will carry with it a lot of the congeners, and you won't get the full experience by swirling it aggressively. So be sure to just be very gentle. Your initial assessment, you should start by holding the glass 5 to 6 inches below your nose and then breathe gently. Avoid taking really deep breaths, sharp sniffs, as high alcohol levels can overwhelm your olfactory system, and that can sometimes burn too. If you can smell a spirit from 5 or 6 inches away, that is a pretty intense spirit. If you can't smell it from 5 or 6 inches away, move it closer. If you still can't detect any aromas, continue to move it closer until whatever the aromas are there present for you, you can smell them. Aromatic intensity is actually determined by how far from the glass you can detect aromas. So the further away from the glass, the higher the intensity. I don't get too crazy about the intensity. I just say it's either a very high intensity, a moderate or medium, and a low intensity. Your first impression, note the immediate aroma impression. You need to write that down. Is the bouquet intense or subtle? Does it smell sweet or dry? Is it fruity, floral, spicy, smoky? Some of these flavors will overwhelm other ones, or aroma compounds like smoky or peaty or medicinal. Some of them are more subdued. It also depends on how the product was aged and how long the product was aged. So if it's a bourbon and it was aged in a new made charred white oak barrel, you'll pick up the vanillas and the coconuts, the things that people always mention around white oak. If it's a sherry finished product, you'll start picking up more of the dried fruits, the prunes and raisins, that kind of thing. Then, to move in closer to the exploration, bring the glass closer and take repeated gentle sniffs from various angles. Rolling the glass under the nose may reveal additional aroma layers. Remember, not all the compounds have the same chemical weight, if you will, and some of them evaporate and come up to your nose sooner than others. Because of this, that's when people start talking about the development of aromas in a spirit. It's because some come off the spirit very quickly or early in the assessment process, while others come in much later or a small period of time later. Then the other question is, what about dilution? Should you use water? Should you not use water? Well, if you're assessing a spirit, what I always do is assess it without any water added the first time. I get my full assessment going. Once I finish that, then I'll add up a few drops of water, but add it up very slowly, because if you add too much water, you will dilute it, and that can have a big impact on your impression, your smelling experience for the aroma. So don't get too crazy with it. Usually, if it's just a ounce and a half sample, you really don't want to put in more than like 5 or 6, 7 drops of water. And make sure that you're using distilled water or water that's been purified, because the last thing you want to do is introduce aromas when you add water to it. At the end of the day, nosing requires a lot of patience and practice. You really need to allow the spirits to breathe for a minute or two as aromas evolved with the oxygen exposure as well. So there's a lot of nuances when people talk about the depth of a spirit or a wine or something like that. This is what they're talking about, the aromas that come off of the sample after the initial impression is received. So then after you get done doing all this, you can check the sample again and just make sure that what you experienced the first time is what you're experiencing the second time. Sometimes it's helpful to have reference frameworks such as aroma wheels or sample kits specific to each spirit type, like a bourbon sample kit or a Scotch sample kit, which help you categorize and even recognize some of these different aromatic compounds. But be aware that those kits can be very expensive, and I haven't found them to be very helpful when I'm doing it by myself. Um, I have used those types of things when I've done classes at the Moonshine University. Their sensory experience class is a 2-day class that I found extremely helpful. So for whiskey, typically some of the aromas you're going to experience, it could be fruity like an apple, pear, citrus. It could be floral, violet, honeysuckle, spicy, black pepper, cinnamon, clove, woody. A lot of times you'll get an oak off of it, especially if it's like a bourbon that's spent a lot of time in oak or it's been double oaked. I'll talk about finishes in another episode. A lot of times with oaks, the new charred oak barrels, you're going to get the caramel or the honey off of it. And then for many scotches, you're getting a peaty smoky experience, which now is coming over to the US, and people are using either peated barley or barrels that have had peated scotch in it to secondarily mature their bourbons, and they pick up that peaty or smoky or medicinal nature that some people like. I particularly don't care for it, but a lot of people really love that smoky, peaty, medicinal nature to their whiskey. So what you're really doing by doing a lot of tastings is you're mentally cataloging the notes, and you build a vocabulary and a memory for future evaluation. The complexity of a spirit's aroma, how many distinct and evolving notes are present, often signals its quality and the intricacy of the production process. But I really found in my experience in the early stages of my learning, I could not sense that complexity. As I have been practicing more and more over the years, I am able to pick up some of the more nuanced aromas, but not in the beginning. So, just to wrap up this nosing section, I just want to summarize by saying regular practice refines both your sensitivity and your confidence in identification, your ability to verbalize it and to write down some notes. And nosing is really both a technical and a deeply personal art, and it takes quite a while to develop it. So let's move on to the next area of spirit experience or exploration, and that's tasting. And that goes simply beyond just drinking the spirit. It involves analyzing the flavors, the balance of the different components of the spirit, the texture, and the finish. So tasting is combined with retronasal olfaction. It allows for the integration of the perception of a spirit's profile not only from your tongue, but back up through the retronasal cavity. The tongue detects basically five tastes, which you are probably aware of: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. Now, interestingly enough, when people mix drinks, they're trying to combine components into a cocktail to balance these the sweet versus the sour and the salty versus the bitter. So while aromatic profiles are traveling up through the back of your mouth, it forms a complete flavor puzzle instead of just having what the experience is on your tongue. The tasting process includes several structured steps designed to maximize flavor experience and to minimize palate fatigue. So first, again, you prepare your area so that you make sure that there's nothing else influencing your experience, and that includes there should be no lingering tastes of food, coffee, or cigarettes from smoking. You can rinse your mouth with water if necessary, but something like toothpaste or anything flavored is going to change your experience. Now, I actually use a tongue scraper as well, and you can get those from dentists, and basically it removes any lining that is developed over your tongue so that your taste buds are actually better exposed. So the first thing you want to do is take just a very tiny sip, not swallow it, just to let it coat your tongue and cheeks. And what this does is it prepares your mouth for the experience. You want to move the liquid around to ensure that everything has been covered, all your taste receptors are engaged and triggered. And actually, some people, you'll hear them go like that, which is irritating to some people, but it's actually a way of pushing those aromatic compounds up through the retronasal area. So the first thing you'll have is the initial flavor detection. You can note the sequence of impressions, which kind of aromas appear first or tastes appear first. Is it like the caramel or is it the nuttiness? Whatever you happen to experience, you should try to log that or write it down. And which flavors are there? Is it sweet? Typically, a spirit that has a higher corn concentration in the mash bill will be sweeter, something that's maybe up to 70 or 80% corn. Then you want to do the mid-palate evaluation. And you can see how long the spirit lingers. Is it deeper? Are there other notes or aromas emerging? And that gives you an ability to assess the clarity and the richness and whatever integration there is in the spirit. Finally, just go ahead and swallow it and pay attention to the finish. Does it linger? Is it still there long after you've swallowed? Does it disappear quickly? Does your mouth feel like it was coated? Or does it feel tannic or dry? Many spirits cause a dryness or astringency in your palate. One of the things you should do between samples is cleanse your palate. You can do that with neutral food such as crackers, or you can do it with water. Some experts recommend unsalted bread or even green apples, which gently reset your taste receptors. Taking detailed notes during tasting sessions really helps you not only sharpen your memory, but it helps you develop this vocabulary that I've been talking about earlier, and it makes it easier for you to record and log your experiences. Descriptive words like vanilla, orchard fruits, baking spice, oily finish, heat or peppery heat, spicy, not the baking spice, but the other sort of spicy, hot, actually help you create a mental map for comparing and learning about the different retronasal aromas as well as the experience on your tongue. So, for flavor identification, you can rely on spirit specific tasting wheels. Whiskey wheels, for instance, provide dozens of flavor categories across the floral, grain, fruit, wood, earth, and more. Wood could be oaky. Earth, I sort of pick up as sort of a musty kind of an experience. And then finally, your mouthfeel and your text and the texture, which is sort of that's your tactile, that's your touch sense coming into play. And the mouthfeel or tactile profile of a spirit incorporates senses like it feels weighty, or it's thick, or viscous, oily, silky. Again, you can experience heat with it as well. Textile characteristics sometimes are overlooked, but they do help you define what that spirit is and decide whether you like it. It also is an indication about how high the alcohol content is, how long it's been matured, because especially with bourbons that have been matured longer, they do have a more of a woody or oaky kind of a nature to them. A little bit more about those parameters with mouthfeel. The body or the weight refers to the thickness or richness on the tongue. It can be thin, can be light, medium, full, or heavy. Viscosity in spirits, usually it refers to the fact that there's a higher alcohol concentration, or there may or glycerol. It may feel oily or slick. Notably in well-matured spirits like whiskey and rum. Astringency, as I mentioned, is that drying or puckering sensation. It's often due to very high tannins that come along with the wood aging, especially long spirits that have been aged for a very long time. Next is the heat, and that's something that everybody feels, particularly a lot of beginners or people that have only tried one or two spirits. I always hear, oh, it burns, all whiskeys burn, I don't want to drink them. Well, the first place is that you probably had a whiskey with a very high alcohol concentration. And if you did, you can sort of turn down the fire a little bit by adding a small amount of water. The other thing is people are used to drinking wine, which is, very low concentration of alcohol. And definitely whiskey does have a much higher concentration of alcohol. But again, the way to reduce that is to add a little bit of water. Then some people describe a smoothness versus a roughness. The spirit glides easily as a smoothness, while a rough one feels abrasive or sharp. It's frequently reflective of insufficient maturation or poor blending. So sometimes that feeling of roughness comes from a spirit that's just too young. Mouthfeel varies a lot between different spirits and even among bottles within the same category. And it really depends on the production features. What a lot of people don't comprehend about whiskeys or a lot spirits in general, no two spirits, no two casks mature the same. Even if the product was distilled the same out of the same still or equipment, everything is always a little bit different. And that's why they blend things. Blending really, if you take one barrel and bottle it, you'll get a specific profile on your spirit. Whereas if you take 200 casks and blend them together, that changes the spirit completely. One of the things to always do, regardless of what phase you're in spirit evaluation, is note the intensity of everything that you see and everything that you feel. Is it very high intensity? Is it a medium? Or is it a low? And just some words for your mouthfeel vocabulary. Developing up a personal set of vocabulary for whiskey is very important. And some of the words people use, it's velvety or silky, grainy, prickly, coating. Those kinds of things help you communicate with peers, and they can highlight the way you experience some spirits. Not necessarily the way they will, but some people will experience them the exact same way that you do. Recent sensory science has emphasized the importance of mouthfeel in consumer preference and brand differentiation, and that really helps among premium spirits. High quality spirits often offer an evolving experience of aromas and flavors. They're shaped by hundreds of volatile compounds or congeners that include esters and aldehydes, lactones, phenols, and these aromatic and taste compounds all originate from the grain, the fermentation, distillation, maturation, blending, and vatting. Now, interestingly enough, I prefer to use the term maturation to aging because aging just sort of indicates that the spirit was in a cask for a specific period of time. But maturation gives you an idea that just like a person, when you're maturing, you're changing throughout your life. You're not the same person you were 20 years ago. And a whiskey's not the same spirit it was 1 year ago because of the maturation, the effect of chemical interactions. And I have a whole podcast that's going to be dedicated to the maturation process. So key dimensions for interpretation are the intensity, the complexity, the balance. Is one taste overwhelming? For instance, I'm not a big fan of some of the finished whiskeys like the maple or the honey finished whiskeys, because for me they become so sweet that I don't get the whiskey nature and experience that I'm looking for when I have a dram. Balance is so important as far as I'm concerned, but everybody's different. And integration gives you an idea whether the aromatic compounds and the taste, if they fit together smoothly or if they clash. All of these factors are great are a great way to explain to other people how you assess or your experience with a spirit. The next term that I love is evolution. Do the aromas and flavors change? And I mentioned this before because what happens is with time and oxygen and temperature changes while you're experiencing the various samples, there are changes to the product. And so you need to sort of keep an idea of how it evolves through your tasting experience. And I like to do this when I'm just having a whiskey at night. I'm sitting by my fireplace or something like that. And I know that how I experience the spirit when I just start drinking it versus when I'm taking the last sip is different, because with that even small amount of time, it opens up the whiskey. It allows it to get oxygen that causes chemical interactions, and it could be significantly warmer. Finally is the finish. Does the spirit leave a lingering, pleasant aftertaste, or does it vanish quickly, or does it leave a nasty aftertaste, which is what I had described with that aged gin. Now, I don't like gin anyways, so the thought of aging it and making that piney kind of a taste and aroma stronger, that's not for me. It is for some people, but it's just not for me. So sensory evaluation is not merely about listing descriptors. It is equally about perceiving how various qualities fit together. For example, a whiskey with an intense layered nose that follows through seamlessly, with the palate finishing being warm and consistent, and you can still experience those flavors that are evolving. That could be a very good spirit. For other people, it's other qualities that make the spirit pleasant to them. What are some tools that you could use to help you through the process of experiencing a spirit? There are flavor wheels or aroma wheels, which I mentioned. There are color wheels as well, or scales. And you want to get one that's tailored to whatever spirit you're drinking, whether that's a whiskey or a rum or a gin or any other spirit. But these aids can help both novices and experts develop a better vocabulary and some different thoughts about the spirits they're tasting. The wheels are group descriptors into broad families, and then they branch into specifics. For example, a fruit. Is it a dried fruit, or is it like a raisin? Is it spicy, or is it baking spice? Or is it cinnamon, so a very specific spice? Human factors play a huge role. Your experience, your memory, your training. So how you perceive a spirit today and how you perceive it 5 years from now might not be the same. The environment you're tasting in can change. You're going to get better doing this just through experience and having a good time with other people and even the company you're with. Experienced tasters often have a more developed sensory vocabulary than beginners who struggle, and I know I did, and I still do sometimes, to identify or articulate certain aromas and flavors that I experience. So some of the things you can help to do to develop and train your palate. Serious enthusiasts use palate training techniques such as comparative tasting, which I love to do that. I did that in a learning environment at the Moonshine University, and their sensory school, the 2-day sensory school, is awesome. There's systematic note taking that helps you develop your vocabulary and the way you express yourself when you're referring to spirits. There are the sense reference kits, and again, I have mixed feelings about that. They're really expensive. They do have very concentrated products, samples of fruit or spice or wood or botanicals. The thing about them, though, is that you really would have to do that on a consistent basis. And if you're not that dedicated to it, it's probably going to be a large expense with a little bit of return on investment. I like to expose my senses to a variety of aromas now as I go about my daily business. They're free and it's fun. Even just walking into a bakery where they bake fresh bread, and then sometimes you can pick that up in the spirits that you've had, or certain smokes. I'm not a smoky, peaty person, but I love to have a fire in my fireplace. And so that's something that I can relate to when I'm talking about a spirit. The consensus from expert tasters is that sensitivity and descriptive power are learned skills, and regular mindful practice is the surest route to mastery, irrespective of your innate sensitivity. So you may not be a super smeller, but you can improve your sense of smell and taste. Some environmental influences on spirit tasting. So one of the things, it's really important, as I mentioned before, with the setting and your glassware. The environment in which spirits are evaluated can dramatically alter your sensory perception. One of my favorite scotches is Glendronach. It's a single malt Highland Scotch, and it's always been my favorite. It was from the first time I tried it, and it still is. But for some reason, when I was at the distillery doing a sherry masterclass training program, it just seemed to taste better. I don't know if it was because I spent so much money doing it, but it did anyways. The glassware that you use, as I mentioned, should be a tulip-shaped glass with a bowl near the bottom. Glencairn or a Coppoda allow the concentration of aromas, and then the direct vapor flows up towards the top of the glass, which is narrowed, and actually helps you get a better bouquet for nosing. The material should be thin. It shouldn't be, a glass that's got a lot of writing on it or something like that, because that affects your ability to actually see the product. The surface area. Glasses with a wide base and a narrow opening, as I mentioned, they help trap and direct aromas, while on the rocks glass or tumblers dissipate them, and that reduces your ability to assess them from an olfactory perspective. Studies confirm that glassware affects not just the aroma clarity, but also the perception of the smoothness and ethanol volatility, suggesting that the correct glass is really critical. It's essential for both analytical tastings and to maximize your enjoyment. Next, a little bit about spirit temperature. As I mentioned before, cooler temperatures tend to blunt aromas. They reduce the volatilization of key compounds. In other words, when you have a coffee that's really hot, you can really smell those aromas. But if you let that coffee cool off or even throw in a couple pieces of ice, it dampens the aromatic expression of the spirit. And that's something you should always keep in mind. It's great to add ice or some water, but it is going to dampen those aromatic compounds from flowing up towards your nose. Most spirits are best sampled at slightly below or just above room temperature, which is 62 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, excessive chilling with ice or with those rocks that people throw in their freezer is generally discouraged during evaluation as it can close off complex flavors. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't use it if you're just sipping a glass of whiskey. I tend to always assess my whiskey, so I typically will drink it neat. But you should always drink it, whether it's in a cocktail or whether it's just the spirit itself, the way that you like it. I do like group tastings. I think they're fun. The social aspect of it does make it fun. But you also you have to realize that what other people say can shape your perception, and it can give you different ideas about the experience that you're having versus what you would have had you been doing it by yourself or doing a training program. Production factors have, the biggest effect on the aromatic experience. Everything from grain to glass will affect the profile of the spirit. That includes raw materials. Again, is it distilled with a column still or with a pot still? Pot stills provide a greater variability in the compounds or the congeners that you can experience, because typically with a column still you're getting a higher ABV product. I'll talk more about that in my distillation podcast, of which I have two. One focused just on pot still or pot distillation and one on columns. Some best practices, again, I mentioned blind tasting. Concealing the brand and the origin helps you focus on the intrinsic qualities of the spirit. Calibration settings. This is something I did at that sensory class that I took at Moonshine University, where you can have three samples, for instance. Two of them are identical and one is different. Are you able to sort out which one is the different one? Flavor wheels and tasting kits I mentioned. And again, there are scoring systems that people can use. I don't do that typically. You can see those being used at competitions, but it's just not something that I do. It's complex. It's very personal. It's fun, and it should be long. I have been doing this for 20 years, and I still experience new things all the time. I learn new things, and the more you do this, the more you're going to realize that you don't know certain things. Mastering the art of smelling, tasting, and experiencing spirits is continuous. It can be a richly rewarding process, and the best part about it is you can share it with other people, so it can be a great deal of fun. The expertise comes not from rushing judgments, but from mindful, repeated experiences, both with spirits and with yourself. And every glass offers an opportunity to refine your perception, your vocabulary, and your appreciation. By integrating best practice techniques, these things that I've talked about, so techniques of nosing, tasting, and interpretation, by supporting attentiveness to human, environmental, and production influences, anyone can develop their understanding, expand their palate, and enhance their enjoyment of whatever spirit you're choosing, whether it's whiskey, rum, gin, or any of the other spirits. I enjoy having a cognac once in a while. Well, thanks for joining me on this whiskey deep dive, and it was a deep one. Next time you get a chance to do a tasting activity, try using the sheet on my blog to develop a consistent process to improve your vocabulary, or find a sheet that somebody else has made. There's hundreds of them out there. Whether as a beginner discovering new flavors or as an expert pursuing perfection, the journey's always fun. It's always fascinating to have a glass, especially one you've never tried. And it's always fun to offer one to someone else. Please join us at the Buffalo Distilling Company for a deluxe tour and tasting by signing up on our website, or join me at one of my whiskey workshops that I will be doing once a quarter starting in January. Until the next podcast, keep sipping, keep exploring, and remember, good whiskey is a well-crafted story. Again, my website is bisonbourbonspiritstc.com. That's bisonbourbonspiritstc.com. This podcast provides general information and entertainment. Always drink responsibly and consult local regulations before imbibing. This podcast is meant for listeners who are of legal age only and not for people below that. I'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, check out my blog, explore the merchandise, and join me for a whiskey workshop or a tasting at the Buffalo Distilling Company. Cheers to bold spirits and curious minds.